It's time for Get the Lac Scoop, a podcast bringing you all the people and stuff you should know in the game of lacrosse. We take Lac seriously, but ourselves, not so much. Join hosts Big Dog and Jaybird and the biggest names in the game. Brought to you by Jay McMahon Lacrosse. That's JML, skills, mindset, and Lax IQ training.
Ron Dalgliesh, the Big Dog, was a collegiate football and lacrosse player at Brown. He was also an assistant lacrosse coach and the executive director of the Sports Foundation.
And Jay McMahon, the Jaybird, a three-time All-American midfielder at Brown. He was a captain of the U.S. Junior National Team and is the founder of JML. And joining us in the studio, Steve Grisolfi, whose collegiate lacrosse career statistics equals 1 goal against Dartmouth.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are excited to bring you part 2 of our interview series with legendary players and coaches Andrew Towers and David Evans. You will find this portion of the interview in progress. Enjoy.
So, Dave, changing gears a little bit, you and Andy both had successful professional careers after college, 6-time All Star in the MLL, as we talked about. And, Andy's now engaged in the next evolution of the program at the PLL. But let's go back old school. What was it like playing in the MLL back in your day? What was that part of your lacrosse journey like?
I mean, I look at it as like, I think Andy would probably, echo this sentiment. Like, I felt lucky to be one of those guys that maybe bridged this generational gap, because we were a little older. You remember the time, okay? We segued from the Excalibur to the Edge. We segued from the old back rack helmet to the Cascade. That that's right. Like my senior year, we're playing guys with Cascades. We're like a bunch of Martians out on the field, and the offset heads and the power cradles coming in, and guys are like, oh, these guys are elite level athletes. No one could, older guys couldn't play with them. And so I'm like, all right, like I hear you. And you know what? I'm gonna blow one up right now, you guys. I'm in the Biltmore at Virginia, and I'm working at Woodbury Forest, and I'm sitting at the bar after the Virginia-Syracuse game, and you got Ryan Curtis sitting there with Tucker Radeball.
And just to give our listeners a little background here, David Evans, our guest, had graduated from Brown in '96, on time, I might add. And who he's talking about here is Ryan Curtis, who would graduate in the year 2000, be the defenseman of the year. He was a 2-time first-team All-American. He had been a first-team All-American the year before, and a player who Dom Starja said was really the linchpin and the biggest leader on the team in 1999 for Dom Starja's first championship. So there's the background, and back to David.
Tucker was coaching at the time. Ryan's a senior. Dougie Knight's there, a bunch of guys, and we're all talking. And I'm in the corner by myself, minding my own business.
Like you usually do, Dave.
I'm laying low.
Sitting quietly.
Yeah. So I'm talking, and actually, you know what? I'm wrong, because Tuck was still playing. That's the year they won the national title.
Okay.
Tuck was he was a senior. Jalbert, Curtis.
99 then? This is 99
yes,
probably?
Yes,
right.
Thank you. Anyway, one of them chirps me, and Tuck says, oh, Dave played at Brown. And Curtis says, like, oh, was he on that team we played at Hofstra? And that was they were all freshmen that year. And we took him to the tilt. We lost in overtime. Tom Collard rings one off the crossbar in overtime. They go down, timeout. Watson runs through our zone, scores, whatever.
You had 5 in the first quarter.
First quarter. Like, they shut me off. They wouldn't let me get the ball, all these things. And I'm like sitting there like, okay, all right. And they're like, oh, Mike Watson had the game winner. I'm like, yeah, sure.
After Fitzy stripped him 11 times.
Right, over the head, too. Over the head, like destroyed him. Anyway, and RD actually went off to like to Bresh and said, can we stop playing zone? We can guard these guys. And that, like, the game all of a sudden became a tilt. And it was like,
and that was Joe Bresci at UNC currently, right?
And
now, Dave, if I can bring you back to the Biltmore, I believe we were back at the Biltmore,
right?
Right. One of them's like, blah blah blah. I don't know who it was. I'll leave that out there. All right, I'll just leave it out there. And so all of a sudden, Andy and I are at the Boston Cannon's first year tryouts. And I roll up there like, God, I might as well have been eating tailgates, man. I was fired up. Like, let's play. This is real. This means something. And I was in sick shape. We were just fired up. And Andy shows up. We're like laughing. And all of a sudden, there's like one-on-ones. We're doing one-on-ones. And I'm like, these poor fucking kids are in trouble. And who shows up? And you know what I started to do? All right, so you're talking about the National Defenseman of the Year, right? Coming out of college. And I was skipping line just to go against him every fucking time. And he looks at me and he's like, yeah, I got you again. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it on purpose.
And how did that go for him? How did that go for him?
You know what, Ron? We'll just leave that out there too. I know this at the end of the day, his wrist hurt. So we'll just, I love Ryan Curtis, but that was a tough day for him.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yep. It was fun, man. It was fun. So to finish that off, I know I'm all over the map, but like we were lucky, man. I was lucky. I felt very privileged to play at that level with those guys. And I would summarize it with this. Anybody out there who's like, oh, this talent today, no way, man. Like if you're elite at any level, at any era, you could play, period. Right. And I always feel like I firmly believe that because if you're going to tell me you're going to put me out there with a bunch of studs, I'm going to adapt and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to play with them. Andy's proven that. I feel like I've proven that. And I know like guys out there would do the same that, you want to play at the highest level.
Because I feel like it's your mentality has so much to do with why you're successful. So like 100%. I said, if their skills are different, you're going to adapt, right?
You're going to compete. You're going to compete because it matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. It's the compete level that ultimately is the reason you succeed because you're just not gonna stop until you get the desired result.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Andy, when you currently, let's say these last 4 years with the PLL have just been amazing and, we love the league. It's just great. And you've been one of the most successful, arguably the most successful, if not one of the most successful coaches, over these last 4 years, getting the finals 3 out of 4 years, winning the championship in 2021. And I was really glad to be there. That was awesome. Yeah. Now, tell us how, the PLL is differing from when you played in the LL. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I played in the MLL, I think I was 34 years old. And so I was well past my best years as a player. So I felt lucky to be able to play in the league. And
what year was this now? Was it?
I think it was 2001 or 2002, something like
2001.
That.
Right.
One, yeah.
Right.
And and to echo Dave's words, the best players in the world were all playing in the league, right? And I don't think that's any different with the PLL. I think the best players are playing in the PLL, and obviously the game evolves and winners find a way to win, which pushes the evolution ahead. And it does it in all facets of the game, whether it's individual offense or defense, facing off, goaltending, whatever it may be. There's not a lot of difference in terms of the PLL and the MLL as it relates to the best players playing, the compete level being incredible. As a coach on the sidelines in the PLL, I think the one area that if I had to really say jumps out at me, is that these guys train, all year round now. While we were all the best players when we were playing in the MLL, David was obviously in peak physical condition at that point, but, I was not. I was still, stretching a single into a triple the night before the game and all that sort of stuff. These guys don't do that. These guys are not out doing that because number one, if you don't dress, you don't get paid. And that was in the same as the MLL. If you don't dress, you don't get paid. But it's really, really hard. There's just a lot more good players these days than there were great players then, right? If the PLL with 8 current teams decided to add 2 more teams, I don't think the quality of play digresses at all.
Right.
And I think that just the expansion of the sport at the youth level, at the high school level. It's affected Division I lacrosse, where there really are very few just walkover games in Division I lacrosse these days. When we were playing at Brown and we went on our best season in 91 when we were players, we played like 4 tough games, kind of.
Right.
These guys that are now playing Division I lacrosse, I feel like they got 10 tough games. And that's just because there's more players, more elite players. And the result is, there's just more guys available to play in the PLL that are dying for an opportunity. And
right.
So, I think the compete level from top to bottom, to me, feels like the world tryouts. In the world tryouts, it's just like, wow,
right. Everybody's
it's such a high level, and there's no, at least leading up to the bubble game. If you don't make that bubble game on Saturday, then you let your foot off the accelerator a little bit, but the compete level in these PLL games, and Jay, you saw it, and David, you guys have seen it, Dog, and I just feel like these guys don't take a playoff, and it's,
right.
It is.
And the other thing we've talked about too is just the ridiculous skill level of these guys, so like for our listeners, what would you say? You got kids out there who want to get into college, and then you got college guys who want to be pros. What are some of these skills, things they're developing that you say is like a must? Like you're not really getting in this league unless you can do X, Y, Z.
Well, the funny
things
thing
like
is,
that.
If David had the fastest shot in the world in, what were those years, Dave? 205, something like that. 206, right?
Yeah.
Here we are, 18 years later, and David would be like in the top 3 or 4 right now. And who's to say he couldn't pick up a fucking stick right now and go out and finish in the top, top 8 or 9. I don't know, but like David was ahead of his time as a shooter. The Gates were ahead of their time as stick handlers. From an offensive standpoint and the associated skills with playing offense, I would look at the league and say in the PLL, there's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 guys on each team that are similarly skilled at the level that the Gates were, which were 25, 30 years ahead of their time. Right. The one area that I think is digressed in the game is that on the defensive end, there's no one out there in today's game that can stick check at a level that Pat McCabe, Steve Kisslinger, Jeff Clausen, Dave Petro, we can go on and on. But the generation of defensemen that we played with in the late 80s through the sort of mid to late 90s, there's guys that'll take the ball away from you now, but they're not taking the ball away from you with 3 check sequences like Pat would do, where he would fake the butt end, or he would fake the poke check, go up the back, right into a ding dong, and a 3 check combination and the ball's on the ground. Or Steve Kisslinger with the fake poke check to the butt end dig to the long john. Like the sequence of calculated check combinations that the defenders played with in our era has sadly become extinct. And the reason I think it's become extinct is because when Bill Tierney went to Princeton and decided to play a defense that slid early and really minimized the amount of perimeter pressure in the spirit of trying to eliminate transition offense, or I should say extra man offense, that started to become emulated, and for a good reason. Obviously, he's, let's face it, the greatest lacrosse coach in the history of the sport, winning 6 national championships. But you saw the success of him winning national championships at Princeton with a defensive first approach.
Right.
And that we really relied on position and double teams and not stick checking. And they didn't give up a lot of man up opportunities. And as coaches would emulate that defensive strategy, eventually what happened is these stick checkers just slowly became extinct. And so like you got Rick Beardsley and some guys that are going around and teaching those checks. And certainly Rick is more than capable, and he's, doing a great job of sort of resurrecting that aspect of play on the defensive end. But there are no defenders in today's games that have the creativity, the timing that those best takeaway defensemen had when we played. And that's a disappointing
so that
fallout
extra man kind of thing, you're thinking it's more like he's eliminating, Coach Tanner's eliminating those unsettled situations that are creating 6-on-5, 5-on-4.
Well,
Is that what you mean?
His scheme defensively was, we're not going to foul because you're not going to step out on the perimeter and throw takeaway checks.
Right.
Because all that does, more so than often, is give them a man-up situation. Or you get beat on the perimeter, and now you've given them an unsettled situation. Instead, he would control where he got beat, bring the slide to the offense before it was ready. And I remember playing Princeton my senior year and being like, God, I just feel like every time I'm making a move, I'm beating the guy that's covering me. And there's another guy right on top of me. And I'm like, the game changed. It seemed like in 1 year, from when our junior year in 91, we played a certain way against defenses. And it seemed like you could just beat people and go to the goal and score. The double teams never got there. To just 2 years later in 93, when David was a freshman and I came back after getting booted out of school for a year. And all of a sudden, it was like these double teams were all over you. I mean, it was
amoeba.
The defensive evolution was incredible with how fast it happened.
Right.
Yeah, and also as the lone defensive guy on this call, it also seemed like the stick technology right on the offensive end. I mean, as a defensive guy, the guys would throw checks, and I think became a disincentive to take those chances because you felt like you could throw a great check and the ball still wasn't coming out. And so that combination of the tyranny team defense, almost like basketball, I'm going to force you to an area where I know I got help. And so that became the way to play defense, and the stick technology on the offensive side, it just became a lost art, Andy, almost.
You're absolutely right, Dog. And the ironic part is that was the exact time that David Morrow and the titanium shafts ended up being at Princeton. And you would think with that stick technology where everybody's playing with these wiffle ball bats, but they're made out of super steel, they don't really break. You think about Kiss or Pat McCabe. If those guys had those sticks, how much more effective they would be. So it was kind of shocking that when the technology created the opportunity for better stick checkers to be in play, it was almost like that style of play dissipated.
How about if we transition to JML? And
let's do that. We'll get into a little bit of the mindset. We'll do a mindset minute here. So this mindset minute will piggyback on what Coach Towers was just talking about, the difference between what he saw from the MLL in the year 2001 to the current version of pro lacrosse with the Premier Lacrosse League. And that was players who train year-round. And that goes right into one of the pillars of mental performance mastery from Brian Kane that we teach at Jay McMahon Lacrosse. Again, Jay McMahon Lacrosse is an app that your student athlete can have on their phone where we teach skills training for lacrosse. We teach lacrosse IQ, and then we also teach mental performance mastery, or also mindset training. And one of the key ones is this routine and habits of excellence skill set. So, and that's what Coach Towers is talking about there. Making changes to achieve success and training hard day in and day out to take performance to the next level is very difficult. And in order to balance that effectively, having this skill set of routines and habits of excellence can make a big difference. And any coach who's out there who's been in the game for any level of time knows that a lot of people are able to get decent results in the short term and maybe can put together a winning season or two. But much rarer are trainers who can guide people to lifelong health and fitness, and coaches who can string together winning season after winning season. And in order to become an athlete who's able to perform at that level, we need to be able to teach our athletes routines and habits of excellence and know how to build these new empowering habits while breaking old limiting ones. And by intentionally training the skill set, we can help our student athletes, and you can help your players, number one, learn how to identify and break limiting habits in a clear, manageable way by understanding what is and what isn't in line with that athlete's goals. Number two is develop the structure needed to build new habits, reducing the toll that this can take physically, mentally, and socially. And socially is really a huge reason why many athletes come up short. Number three, learn how to rely more on the power of routine when building and breaking habits, and less on a limited supply of self-discipline and willpower. Number 4, leverage the power of routines before, during, and after competition to consistently perform your best when it matters the most. And again, this is something that we teach with Jay McMahon Lacrosse as part of the mental performance mastery aspect. And we have the free version of our app linked to this program. So I would recommend going ahead and downloading that or having your child do that and look at the free portion. And then if they want to go ahead and take one of the courses that are there, that would be great too. But again, Brian Cain is a great resource. He's got a lot of free information on his website. That's briancain.com, BRINCAIN.com. And we will return back to our program.
Yeah. So look, Andy and David, you guys are showing this in spades, right? Is one of the things we like to focus on in this podcast is the meaningful relationships that we form through the game. And Andy, you were talking about Matt Panetta, a guy you played with on the U19 team, who's now still your assistant coach all these years later. And but Dave, I want to know what you remember about your freshman year at Brown. And as Andy just mentioned, he comes back to Brown for then his senior year, and you're a freshman. What was that relationship like from the start? And was his success a motivator for you? And how has your relationship evolved over all these years?
Quite honestly, I was very fortunate Andy was there. I always I do believe there's I don't know, there's a higher power or somebody who watches over you, but as much as it might seem a detriment to the guys from that 92 squad that missed Andy down at Carolina. And, I think it was also a blessing for me because I don't know what I would have done, because we would go out after practice every day and, try to kill each other in terms of one-on-ones. And there weren't guys that could throw exactly what Andy's talking about, throw checks and throw, stuff that was going to take the ball away. So you go through practice and you're kind of all right, this is a finishing drill. And you're okay, what's the next thing? And I'm not taking anything away from our defense at Brown at the time. They were conservative. We were conservative. Dom was pretty conservative. Harvey Smith, great dude. We're going out doing one-on-ones and it wasn't necessarily aggressive, I want to go take the ball away from you, where Andy and I would go out after practice and talk about who you're going to play. And I've never forgotten that, because we dissected every player. And then what we haven't discussed, but Andy came back in 94 and was there in my ear that entire run. And I knew every defender. And by the way, we didn't have film like kids do today. We had experience. We had even then, VHS, it didn't come until the tournament. So we didn't have film on every team we would play. And 94 was a different animal for Brown lacrosse, because we played the teeth. We went and locked horns with Duke, Loyola, Syracuse, Princeton, boom, in that order. And, it was oh, okay, here we go. And then, you got your Ivy League schedule, which got more competitive. And so, without that experience with Andy and, his development as a coach, I've always said it. I've been unabashed about it. I'd tell anybody. And it's why he is as good as he is at what he does today, dissecting players' strengths, weaknesses, understanding how to manipulate that and make the most out of a player is absolutely a strength. And he helped me do that while I was a young player at Brown. And it was more about the relationship and the competing level and having fun and being a goon. It's hard, man. You're at Brown, man. I'm surrounded by people telling me
not as many goons there.
Man, it's a tough place for a goon. And then you're not allowed to get in fights or anything like that. So it's okay, what do I do? I go out and Andy and I beat the hell out of each other. And it was fun.
Great.
It was fun.
I remember Andy too was very tactical,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he might be known to be a little bit of a goon, but he's also just a very smart player, and he's a very smart coach. And he was one of the first guys. I remember him when he was playing attack, actually, when I was a junior. He was a sophomore. because he had PG'd a year, and him saying to me, I need to get to this spot. And I didn't really even know what he was talking about. And then I realized, I'm like, you're right. You got to figure out, and this is kind of silly, but I'm a junior in college. I didn't even really think of it that way. I was probably getting to that spot on a sweep or on an alley dodge as a midfielder, but didn't really think about that's my objective. And he's like, how am I going to get to this spot? And so it was very tactical. And I tucked that one away, and it was very helpful going forward. So
just for our listeners, Dave, what you were referring to, right, is Andy's a senior on that 93 team, and then comes back for your sophomore year as an assistant coach at Brown. So that relationship continues, but now where he's coaching you as a part of that Final Four run.
Yeah. And your first
absolutely.
team All-American that year too for David.
Well, and too, remember, like, I played attack, very specific skill set. And I've Andy's he's always understood like the finer stuff, but behind the scenes, like how are we gonna win this matchup, etc. And as a sophomore, he had complete confidence in me, like this guy's a senior, he shut down Mark Millen, blah blah blah. This is how you're gonna beat him.
You didn't know this though, David. The reality is you were a matchup nightmare, right? You were way too fucking big and strong for anybody that could match your feet, right? And anybody that was big enough in stature to try to bang with you couldn't match your feet. And the problem for them was you could beat them to the left and to the right, and you could feed. As a guy that scored so many goals, you still were what I would say these days a perfect passer. And what I mean by that is somebody that sees all five guys every time they play. So, and the intangibles were probably your greatest strength. Obviously, we know about your fiery competitive attitude, but you genuinely were only hung up on winning, right? And that I was not. Like, I knew how many points everybody had. I was like aware of all of that shit. Like, you were such a unicorn with respect to being such a great player, but like you could go out and go 7-0, you could go 0-7, and you could also go 0-0, and you'd be just as fucking happy after the game as long as the team won. Like, about nobody's like that. Like, about nobody's like that. You kind of have to be a little bit greedy, I believe, to put up good stats on a consistent basis. And even though you did that at an unbelievably high level, the number one driving force was winning the game. And so to be able to have a guy that can literally dodge, if you want him to, 25 times a game, not get tired, win the matchup, draw, slide. And if they don't slide, fast enough, you're going to score the goal. And if they slide too quickly, you're going to be able to find the open guy. And if they slide perfectly where the secondary pushes the primary, you have an unselfishness to you that you're perfectly willing to hit the outlet and let the outlet exploit the defense until they recover. And that last part is something that not a lot of people are willing to do. There's guys out there that go out and get a lot of points, but almost always they come with a lot of turnovers. You had a shitload of points with very few fucking turnovers. And that's an asterisk that not a lot of great players can say they have. That's for sure.
That's true. That's great. Awesome stuff. Now, Andy, how would you describe your relationship with David now?
Phenomenal. I consider him to be one of my best friends in the world. It is awesome to watch the success that he's had. And let's face it, the sport of lacrosse and the kids today just happen to be lucky that he's in the lacrosse world, right? But, honestly, David is a unstoppable force. And anything that he chose to do or chooses to do, he's ultimately going to be the best at it, right? And I think that he does it in a same side of the fence way where he's an easy guy to root for. I think that he leads with character. I think he leads certainly with passion. He leads with humility, but don't mistake it. There is zero self-doubt that he has, and I look up to Dave in a lot of ways, as certainly in the lacrosse world, but I look up to David in terms of his character and the way that he is a great husband to his wife. He's a great father to his kids. He's super passionate. And the best thing about him is he's 100% authentic. right? Everything that he does, he's true to himself 100% of the time, and he's consistent. And I think that there's no greater compliment that you can give a man than that.
That's it.
So Andy, I mean, everything you just said rings so true. But I just want to make sure? Did you say that Dave leads with humility? Did you? I thought I did. You did you say that? I don't. Maybe I haven't experienced that part of the.
You don't really know the
man.
man.
I might need to. Maybe I'll need to refresh on that. Everything else.
There's a difference between being cocky and being accurate, right? David's accurate.
That's right, Andrew.
He says.
Hey, I want to transition us here to some of the work you guys are doing today. But in saying that, Jay, just a couple of reflections as I think about, having known these two guys for so long, but listening them today, and what these two can teach today's players. Compete. I mean, these two had such incredible natural athletic ability and lacrosse ability and talent, but they competed and worked at what they did as hard as any two people I know. And
like you said, it was after practice. What are they doing? They're not leaving.
Working.
They're working. They're talking about how they can compete more. Not hard, but smart too. They're talking about it.
I mean, I remember the stories of how many shots Mr. Evans used to make you take, David. But then that became your habit where you wanted to do it. So the work ethic. And then the other thing I love about you guys, and we've seen it today, you always do it with joy, right? You got to have fun at what you do. And you see so many kids today where it's just a slog. It was never a slog for you two. I always was laughing around you two when you're playing the game. So you can compete and work your tail off and also enjoy it. So I think just a couple of key lessons that you guys just emulate in everything you do as players, as coaches, as people. So enough of Ron's little speech there. Let's move on to the questions, shall we?
Appreciate it, Don.
But so, Dave, you also coached at the college level. Now you've been a long-term club coach. You've been a recruiting coordinator for Massachusetts, hugely successful club. There's so many clubs out there. And, for our listeners, we try to bring the advice and the wisdom of our guests to our listeners. What should people be looking for who are maybe coming up and just starting in the club game? How do you pick the right club? There's some good ones and let's just say some not so good ones. What are some of the key characteristics that you think maybe have made Massachusetts successful, but also what parents and kids should be looking for as they choose a club program?
Wow, there's a ton of meat on this bone. It's a really tough topic because it essentially comes back to the kid and the parent, because we are in a sport that's we're still tend to be the redheaded stepchild. I don't know if that's politically correct. I apologize if not, but in terms of it's like football, soccer, hockey. Oh, what about lacrosse? So we play and coach a highly skilled sport. So if you want to play college lacrosse and you're in high school, you need to commit to certain things, I think. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody's going to multi-sport athlete. Yes. I think that's important to develop as a young player, keep you stimulated, and the skill sets that come along with lateral movement, speed, quickness, all those things. But I do think that if you're going to dip your toe in this pool, you're going to be disappointed. And if you're going to sign your son or daughter up for a club that's going to practice once a month for, 3 months and then go on a circuit, you're going to get drubbed. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to waste your money. Back up and say, I want to play lacrosse. Then you need to commit to a club that's actually got training, fundamental skill work, maybe even a speed, conditioning aspect. Everybody's different in that, depending on the commitment. And then, team-wide stuff too. There's a lot of different models in the club circuit, which I think is important for a parent. To your point, important for a parent to actually do some research on. All right, my club, very near and dear. I have 4 or 5 teams in the youth level. Okay. Development goes as the commitment goes. The kids that commit, they generally matriculate to the top 2 teams. The kids who are playing hockey and club soccer that don't show up, they get to like those single A teams, and you know who they are. You know, you don't see them for 4 weeks and they show up, and it's, you know, peas on a knife. So then you have like that club that has a team or maybe 2, and they have practices sporadically. And then, you know, they have a skill set offering on the side, etc., if you have time. And those are, you know, everybody has different schedules, different commitments. I get it. I'm living it. Okay. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I have a daughter who's in 8th grade. She plays club soccer, club hoop, and club lacrosse. Guess what? She could play all 3 in college. No doubt in my mind. She's a freaking beast. And I watch her play and I'm like, shit. And I know it's my daughter, right? But I don't care. I'm watching it and I'm like, this chick can play. She can straight up ball. And then I'm like, oh, club soccer. You got it. That's it. Freshman year, you're done. You can't play any other sport. Really? So then you matriculate to like Chapel Hill and you can't play varsity soccer and then varsity lacrosse? I don't buy it. So I think you have to do that research. You have to figure that out. You know, like I do think it can be really tough. I lived it too with my other side. My son played varsity hoop. Okay. He can't make skills, right? He comes home, he's gassed, 7:30, competing. When you talk about like these sports and what you're looking for, you really have to sit down and like examine. If you're throwing a broad net, you're going to catch a minnow. You know, you got to throw that lure in, catch a tuna. And you know,
at what age would you say they got to start honing it down and saying, all right, you know, and how would we want to tie this into the recruiting process, right? Like you're saying, your daughter here, 8th grader, they're telling her, you know what, 9th grade comes, you really can't play soccer and all these other sports. You got to just pick soccer. I know lacrosse doesn't do that. I don't think basketball does that. But for these lacrosse people who are listening, give us an idea of the age and then how this leads into the recruiting process, if you could. You'll need to tune in next week to hear the answer to that question from David Evans, college recruiting director from Massachusetts. That will complete this part 2 of our 3-part series with these 2 legendary lacrosse coaches and players, Andy Towers and David Evans. Make sure to tune in next week. Look forward to see you there. And if you can, give us a review. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping by, and until we meet again, here's to hoping you find the twine. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our Get the Lac Scoop podcast. Also, you can check out videos at our Facebook page at Jay McMahon Lacrosse or on Instagram at jmcmahonlax23, or check out our full podcast with video on our YouTube channel along with the video of the week.